Carrie Geren Scoggins, Political Newsletter, Bible Prophecy Times Edition, End Times Prophecy News Update.
Hi, and welcome back to End Times Prophecy News Update. Breaking news story. Christopher Cornell, a United States citizen that has become entangled with ISIS online and have converted to Islam, has now been taken into custody by the FBI, and according to CBS News, it was only under, quote, suspicion. They've aired the story stating that it was an arrest. One in the United States cannot be arrested unless a crime has been committed. You've heard me report prior on the NDAA, Indefinite Detainment. Unless they've used the Indefinite Detainment bill, as Obama has already promised he would not, there's no way he could be incarcerated. According to the news story, they had him buying weapons and making statements online, possibly preparing to do something. But according to our laws, our Constitution, one has to actually commit a crime in order to be arrested or detained. The indefinite detainment legislation brought forth by Obama and the Democrats is the most unconstitutional piece of legislation America has seen in this decade. Many were concerned back during the Patriot Act 1 and 2, and prior to that, the Clintons' 1995 Rhombus Crime Bill, which had laid out all of the provisions in the Patriot Act 1 and 2, only it had an expiration date. So when the next president took office, they reinstated it through a different piece of legislation. But it notedly came from the Clintons. Now, we see the indefinite detainment, NDAA. Again, detaining people upon suspicion, or you're on a watch list that the government does not like your behavior, and therefore, you've been placed on a list of political dissidents. This is unconstitutional at its core. We have freedom of political beliefs straight across the board, and a Second Amendment concerning those who are buying weapons. Our government does not have the legal right to detain someone for buying weapons, or being angry at the system, or converting to Islam, or any other religion, unless they're using this unconstitutional NDAA, indefinite detainment. Write your legislators and begin to bring this information up. The NDAA needs to be overturned. It's a threat to all United States citizens and our freedom. Throwing out the constitutional civil rights of anyone the government has now labeled a dissident, and this new idea of calling America the battlefield and saying that the American citizens can now be considered a, quote, enemy combatant, throwing out their civil rights. And as in the video clip that will follow, you will see our own legislators and many Democrats involved in on this making statements such as, quote, if you want an attorney, you don't get an attorney. You're an enemy combatant. Locked up for life. No court hearing, no judge, no promise of our jury by our peers. No sentencing, no appeals courts. Just locked up for life. Our government could never be trusted with this type of legislation. We've seen how crooked our law enforcement is. And it's from the top to the bottom. Federal, state, and local. All all the way down to the lowly informant. We find extreme corruption and dirty deals. Imagine if you had no constitutional rights to protect you from it. That's what the NDAA is. Taking away of individuals' constitutional rights upon suspicion or because you're a political dissident. Are they trying to get the American public to buy this by using people who look menacing? He's converted to Islam. He's bought guns. Who's next on the watch list? After America buys the loss of constitutional civil rights for political dissidents, will it be the Christians? Now that they've turned the military against the Christian population, spreading accusations that they're, quote, extremists. And Southern Poverty Law Center trying to push the ideal upon federal, state, and local officers that Christians are to be considered a hate group, such as the American Family Association, of whom they've cited as their target and their, quote, supporters. If you're a Christian and you support the American Family Association, you could be next on the list of those to be indefinitely detained, incarcerated for life, never getting to see an attorney, never getting to see a courtroom or a judge, and not having broken any law. And when in actuality, the government would be violating your civil rights, breaking laws such as the 1964 Civil Rights Act, giving Christians protected class status under the law, the legal right to adhere to their biblical core values ruling by the federal Supreme Court, federal laws instilled to protect Christians from illegal discrimination from government. Who's next on the list? We've also seen recently stories of the Dallas Black Panthers standing armed guard. Will they also be indefinitely detained because they've seen someone that they want to look menacing to the public carrying a gun? What about the open carry protesters? Our civil rights are at stake. The NDAA, an indefinite detainment, is the most unconstitutional legislation that America has seen in this decade. Write your legislators and demand that this be overturned. They want to see to it that those they detain do not get an attorney and a court hearing, because indeed they've broken no law. If they were to see a courtroom, it would be overturned. It would make it all the way to the federal Supreme Court, overturning their legislation. They fear this because they know it's overthrowing the court systems of the United States government. No matter what type of protester one is, ranging from Ferguson, Anonymous, Occupy, Tea Party, straight across the board, from the political right to the political left, pro-life or pro-choice, all are under the threat of government detaining you for life without arrest, as no law has been broken, through the NDAA and indefinite detainment. This is Carrie Geren Scoggins for End Times Prophecy News Update. Thank you for listening.
And when they say, I want my lawyer, you tell them, shut up.
Your time has
Don't get a
expired.
lawyer. You're an enemy combatant.
Now laying out its legal argument for killing American citizens overseas without a trial. But what about targeting people on U.S. soil? Can they now kill American citizens inside the country? The head of the FBI, when asked about that on Capitol Hill yesterday, stumbled around on this.
Does that only apply to U.S. citizen that's overseas, or does that apply to U.S. citizen that's here?
I'd have to go back. I'm not certain whether that was addressed or not.
So that we have clarity here, he is not certain whether it was addressed, whether our government can kill our own people inside our own country. This really needs to be addressed. We can't just answer this question. No, the government doesn't kill our own people. We have a process for this. It's called the justice system. You file charges, you lock them up, you try them before a jury of their peers, and then that's how. They don't kill our own people. Judge, the question is, can they kill our own citizens inside our own country?
Well, the answer,
this is a question we have to ask.
It's not a question that we should have to ask, and it's not a question that he should have evaded answering. I think he probably knows that the answer is no, but he doesn't want to frustrate his bosses, who articulated just 2 days earlier that the answer is yes, because at a speech on Tuesday at Northwestern University Law School, the Attorney General of the United States manifested extraordinary ignorance of the Constitution of the United States and suggested the president can kill anybody he wants outside the United States if that person is dangerous, if that person has committed crimes, and if it's impractical to arrest that person. Not in the opinion of a jury, but in the opinion of the president and some secret advisors. The Constitution says to the contrary. The Constitution says if the government wants your life or your liberty or your property, it has to articulate to a jury what law you have violated and prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt to that jury. It's called due process. Without due process, the government could take anything it wanted and kill anybody it wanted. And Attorney General Holder ought to know that. I suggest that Bob Mueller does. And the reason he evaded that answer is because he wants to keep his job.
Well, you heard what Eric Holder said. He said there is due process, but there is not due juris something or other.
Judicial process.
Not judicial process.
What the Attorney General said, let me make his argument. His argument is that there is a substituted form of due process. That if the president and his advisors carefully consider the danger of a human being and conclude that that human being needs to be stopped before that person causes any more danger, then the president can kill him. That's their argument. There is no case law that stands for that. There is no statute that authorizes it, and it directly defies the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Sounds like a crime against humanity. What's the difference between that and what Bashar al-Assad is doing to his own people? What is the difference?
Nothing. What's the difference between killing somebody, an American with a drone in Yemen, and killing an American with a drone in Peoria? Nothing. Right. Same argument that Eric Holder made at the Northwestern Law School on Tuesday about al-Awlaki in Yemen could be made about somebody in Peoria tomorrow.
You make an illegal lane change in Hollywood on the 101 freeway, and a drone will just shoot you out of the sky and throw you, bury you.
Well, I don't know that it's going to
I don't know either, but who'd have thought we'd ever get to hear?
Who would have thought that we'd even be having a conversation like this? That the head of the FBI would hesitate to answer a question that is so imbued in our history and our law and our values, due process precedes punishment, that he can't answer that in public.
And we're worried about contraception.
Correct. Correct. We do not have our priorities straight. The last time the federal government claimed that it could kill Americans was in the Civil War. And even Lincoln said it could only be done during combat. This federal government, this administration says it can kill Americans when they're riding with their children in a car in a desert.
I don't know, Judge.
Missouri look more like a war. Police roll down the streets in armored vehicles and full combat gear.
One of the major national issues now arising from the recent events in Ferguson, Missouri, is the militarization of local police forces. How much is too much? Well, a controversial new Army training manual dealing with civil disobedience may bring an answer to that question.
This training manual, first, is an Army, training manual that deals for both, civil disobedience both in their operations outside of the United States, but the rear hook that has everyone so concerned is that it also deals with civil disobedience inside the United States. And so what's in there that's very, very interesting, that has people just very much up in alarm, is that against a non-armed crowd, they actually have lethal responses laid out in there of taking out specific agitators with sniper rifles, or even opening small arms fire into an unarmed crowd. You know, it's a one of the most, I would say, detailed documents and training manuals I've ever.
Didn't do anything, but you're gonna. Future murder. Creepy, right? Putting somebody in jail not for what they've done, but for what you're very sure they're going to do?
There may be a number of people who cannot be prosecuted for past crimes. In some cases because evidence may be tainted, but who nonetheless pose a threat to the security of the United States.
We're not prosecuting them for past crimes, but we need to keep them in prison because of our expectation of their future crimes.
Al-Qaeda terrorists and their affiliates are at war with the United States, and those that we capture, like other prisoners of war, must be prevented from attacking us again.
Prevented. We will incarcerate people preventively. Preventive incarceration. Indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is. That's what President Obama proposed today, if you strip away the euphemisms. One civil liberties advocate told the New York Times today, quote, "We've known this was on the horizon for many years, but we were able to hold it off with George Bush. The idea that we might find ourselves fighting with the Obama administration over these powers is really stunning." And it is stunning, particularly to hear President Obama claim the power to keep people in prison indefinitely with no charges against them, no conviction, no sentence, just imprisonment. It's particularly stunning to hear him make that claim in the middle of a speech that was all about the rule of law.
But we must do so with an abiding confidence in the rule of law. Our government was defending positions that undermine the rule of law to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law.
How can a president speak the kind of poetry that President Obama does about the rule of law and call for the power to indefinitely, preventively imprison people because they might commit crimes in the future? How can those two things coexist in the same man, even in the same speech? Well, that brings us to the self-consciously awkward, embarrassing part of this speech today. After condemning the Bush administration for what he called their ad hoc legal strategy for trying to make things seem legal that patently weren't, this is what President Obama proposed.
My administration has begun to reshape the standards that apply to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law. We must have clear, defensible, and lawful standards for those who fall into this category. We must have a thorough process of periodic review so that any prolonged detention is carefully evaluated and justified. Our goal is to construct a legitimate legal framework for the remaining Guantanamo detainees that cannot be transferred. Our goal is not to avoid a legitimate legal framework. In our constitutional system, prolonged detention should not be the decision of any one man. If and when we determine that the United States must hold individuals to keep them from carrying out an act of war, we will do so within a system that involves judicial and congressional oversight. And so going forward, my administration will work with Congress to develop an appropriate legal regime so that our efforts are consistent with our values and our Constitution.
You'll construct a legal regime to make indefinite detention legal. You will, what does he say? Develop an appropriate legal regime. So you can construct a whole new system outside the courts, even outside the military commissions, so that you can indefinitely imprison people without charges. And you'll build that system from scratch. What's that somebody said about ad hoc legal strategies? Just for context here, in the United Kingdom, where there isn't even a Bill of Rights, there's been a major debate about whether people can be held in preventive detention. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair wanted 3 months to be the outer limit for how long anyone could be held. There was a big political fight about it. Parliament ended up limiting that power to 28 days. 28 days is still the longest period of preventive detention that's allowed under law in any comparable democracy anywhere in the world. How long would President Obama's proposed preventive indefinite detention last? Well, he's not saying yet, but here's how he defines the threat that he says makes indefinite detention necessary.
Right now in distant training camps and in crowded cities, there are people plotting to take American lives. That will be the case a year from now, 5 years from now, and in all probability 10 years from now.
10 years from now. So you could get arrested today and locked up without a trial, without being convicted, without being sentenced for, say, 10 years until the threat of your future criminal behavior passes? Prolonged detention, he's calling it. This was a beautiful speech from President Obama today with patriotic, moving, even poetic language about the rule of law and the Constitution, and one of the most radical proposals for defying the Constitution that we have ever heard made to the American people.
Well, the most interesting exchange occurred at the end of the day when the judge was questioning the government lawyers and kept trying to press them for an assurance that I or any of the other plaintiffs would not be, that government could guarantee that we would not be picked up by the NDAA, which of course permits the government to strip us of due process, hold us, not only allow the military to hold us, but hold us in a military facility, including an offshore military facility, and the government just repeatedly would not do that. It was a really sort of frightening moment when it was clear that the nebulous language of the bill, even in the view of the government, offered no protection.
Yeah, certainly that was one of the things that could have been, at least something they could have done, is to add language, one sentence perhaps, that said, this will not affect journalists who are doing their job.
Well, or American citizens. I mean, Dianne Feinstein had proposed that they insert into the legislation wording that exempted American citizens. And that was something that the sponsors of the bill, Carl Levin and John McCain, as well as the Obama White House, decided not to do.
Really, really interesting that happened. We saw last week, even though this bill has passed, it was signed into law on New Year's Eve when a whole lot of us were, out celebrating the new year. We're starting to see both Republicans and Democrats in Congress, even as recent as last week, sort of retake interest in this matter, retake interest in the NDAA, and perhaps talking about doing some things in the future to change it. But Mark Udall already tried to make an amendment to take out some of the controversial aspects of it. That wasn't put into place. Why is it that these lawmakers are taking this up again?
I'm not sure why. I mean, I think that and we're really not, this is a long document, the NDAA. We're only talking about two sections, Section 1021 and Section 1022, which in essence allows the executive branch to strip an American citizen of their constitutional rights to due process and to hold them in military facilities. That's what we're questioning, a very, very tiny part of the bill, which I think, you don't have to be a legal scholar to determine is clearly unconstitutional. I mean, the egregious violation of constitutional rights is really, undeniable.
So that's your argument, and it's a very solid and kind of simple one. What is the argument of the government, who says that this is, in fact, a viable law?
Well, the argument of the government is that we are not covered persons. And that's also part of the language of the bill. Covered persons are people who substantially supported al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or what they call associated forces, which again is undefined. What are associated forces? What does substantially mean? What does supported mean? These are very, very vague terms that encompass a variety of groups, many of which did not even exist during the attacks of 9/11. And I think it was telling to all of us in the courtroom that when Judge Forrest pressed the government on this issue, the government would offer absolutely no guarantees that our constitutional rights would be protected because, given the language of this bill, or now law, they can't.
It is really interesting, and it seems to me not accidental that a lot of this language is so vague that was put into the bill. I know afterwards you guys had a press conference outside. What is sort of the message that you're trying to get across now, in between now and the time a ruling is issued?
Well, I was being grilled, so I wasn't part of the press conference. That took place while I was...
Oh, it was while you were inside the courtroom.
I was actually going back and forth with Assistant U.S. Attorney. Well, the message is that this is not the kind of power we want vested in the hands of the state because eventually they'll use it. Alexa O'Brien, one of the plaintiffs from the
US Day of Rage,
spelled out or offered emails that had been released through WikiLeaks of Stratfor, which attempted to tie her organization with jihadist groups and al-Qaeda. I mean, that's what they do. When you build this...
So this isn't something that could happen. This is something that is already happening.
That's correct. And my fear is that if the Occupy movement or an incarnation of the Occupy movement rises again, if there are more mass protests, which I expect there will be, since the government has done nothing to ameliorate the problems that push people out into the streets, then it becomes very easy to link these peaceful, nonviolent, dissident movements with terrorism, and at that point we're all finished. And I think that it is for those of us who are fighting this bill, it's an understanding that it's not about them, i.e. those on the outside. It's really about us.
In New York, where they put thousands of peaceful political protesters in a stockade and actually ran buses inside, making them sick and laughing at them, and had porta potties. And I'd seen this before, 5 years before in Austin, and it's still there, but now it's at Bergstrom, not just the old airport, Robert Mueller, where they have giant hangars with bolts and chains in the floors, porta potties, cots, barbed wire, which they admit are for civil unrest periods, to bring the political dissidents, interrogate them, and then decide who gets sent out to the government aircraft for rendition that we just showed you earlier. That's a black bag over the head, and you go to a center overseas to be killed, to be tortured, whatever the case is. And remember, we've got clips of U.S. senators saying, we want Americans to be scared. Lieberman, you're an American, you say, I want a lawyer, shut up, you don't get one. This is all about the criminals that have hijacked the government, sold the derivatives, bankrupted the nation, federalized everything. This is about their takeover of society. And I cannot stress to you how hardcore this info is, just confirming that they have these hubs to then relocate people. And that's all in the Emergency Centers Establishment Act. It's in Rex 84. They admit it's the old military bases is where you'll be taken. Also, we have more prisons than any other country in the world, larger prison population. They've got old derelict prisons shut down and waiting in the Military Commissions Act, in the Civilian Inmate Labor Camp program, in all of these. And you can search engine every term I'm giving you and have government documents admitting it. When the media says, oh, we investigated camps and can't find them, that's bull. That's them putting fake garbage, we've learned, on the web that are straw men to lead you to things that aren't real. We're giving you the facts. And you've heard the NDAA saying they'll arrest you and kill you or torture you and disappear you. So stop living in denial. So we're going to first go to Pier 57, then back to 99 with Robert Mueller. 57's from 2004. Sandpoint is from 99 in Seattle. And notice it's run by FEMA. Oh, the old military base is shut down. FEMA runs it now, and they put the protesters in there. It's always FEMA. That's in the regulations as well. And then we've got LAX from January 2012. Here is this incredible report. FEMA camps confirmed. These are rendition kidnapping hubs. It doesn't get more important than this. Imagine if people would have known about Hitler early on and actually fought him. He could have been defeated. Or Lenin or Stalin or Mao. This is America. We're not perfect, but you know what? We're not poor serfs in Russia or Germany. We're going to fight back. And we're going to fight back with the info war while the sun's still shining. The sun's setting on our republic. Tyranny's coming in. And people are starting to listen. You want hardcore data? Here it is.
We're in New York City, right here on the Hudson River. And this condemned former bus station where they stored the buses is being used to hold over 2,000 protesters. And they admit that they randomly set up fences and scoop up whole crowds of people and then take them here. And for over 3 days, they've not let people talk to lawyers, call out, talk to their families. Some have been released. Some have gone to the hospital with rashes over their entire bodies. This building is condemned. The city admits it. The bus union wouldn't allow them to use it years ago, so they turned it into an emergency police facility. It's full of asbestos, chemicals, oils from decades and decades and decades in this 70-year-old building, and the average stay for someone scooped up in there is over 24 hours. The city even admits that.
Many of the nearly 2,000 protesters arrested over the past few days have been taken to an old bus depot on Manhattan's west side. But now the use of Pier 57 as a temporary holding facility is stirring up some controversy of its own. Protests are being held there to spotlight conditions. Some of those being detained say they're getting sick. There are reports of cramped conditions, rashes, chemical burns, and difficulty breathing.
We should call this facility what it is, and it's a concentration camp. It's the Pier 57 concentration camp.
The mayor has the nerve, and the police commissioner has the nerve to allow this to happen, to actually stick people in an oil-filled garage with asbestos.
Across the nation, at airports and old military bases, they're installing hangars and structures to intern the American people under military control. They're also integrating local police. You've already seen some of the evidence. But even the town where I live, Austin, Texas, is not immune from these activities. We're told that there's a holding facility here on the old Robert Mueller Municipal Airport, a hangar to hold people. Have you been inside there?
No, not since they fixed it up. I haven't. I was under the fixing it up.
How did they fix it up?
Well, you probably don't recognize it, but it's an abandoned hangar at the old airport just off 51st Street. Today and tomorrow, sheriff's employees are turning this place into a booking center and even a holding cell. Now, it really doesn't look like much, and okay, it's really not, but it is a perfect place to set up shop. Anyone arrested in the Travis County area during the New Year's Eve party for a Class C misdemeanor will be brought out here. Sheriff's officials tell me it's pretty primitive. Inmates will be fingerprinted and allowed 2 free phone calls. Then they'll be held here for about 4 hours, just enough time to sober up. Then they'll be released and expected to appear in court in the future. Only people who have ID on them will be brought out here, since they won't have the capability to run fingerprint checks, and they're mostly expecting people arrested for public intoxication down in the A2K and 6th Street areas. This temporary booking facility opens up for business tomorrow night. That's Thursday at 8 o'clock.
We're hoping to get staff acclimated to working in this environment starting tomorrow, with hopefully a low volume of arrests. So hopefully by come Friday night, everyone will know how the flow is going to work in here and be used to it.
The holding cell is surrounded by this chain link fence, and the fire marshal has told the sheriff's department that they can hold about 380 people in here, and the sheriff's deputies are ready for a busy night.
Anyone who got in their way was arrested and shipped to a FEMA center, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. In direct violation of Posse Comitatus, had Delta Force on the ground from day one of the demonstrations and protest, continually integrating the local, state, county, and city police under federal command. This should be a giant red flag for any American concerned about their God-given rights and their freedom in this country.
At least 250, perhaps more, and those that have been taken into custody from the streets of downtown Seattle protesting for a variety of reasons. The World Trade Ministers here on their visit. You see them here with their hands pretty much cuffed behind their backs with those plastic sort of strap handcuffed apparatus. They are being led into the Sandpoint Brig. Remember, we told you about this story, dancing all the way in some cases. We told you about this story a couple of weeks ago. A number of the neighbors in that area of Sandpoint Naval Air Station were shocked to hear that the old brig was being reopened just in case it was needed, and it has been. As we said, at least 250 arrests now, maybe more.
And we've seen 400 people arrested. The facility at Sandpoint, we're told, is full. We're told they did not create another one at Boeing Field. But they continue to arrest people, and they continue to crack down hard on the protesters this afternoon.
The worst thing is I finally saw something with my own eyes. It's one thing to talk about it, hear people talk about it on the radio, etc. I saw this with my own eyes at LAX, the Los Angeles airport. They've built a giant human holding pen. It's obvious. It's quite obvious what it's for. It's for processing people. This thing, they used to park all of our limousines and cars and buses at the eastern end of the north set of runways. There's 2 sets of runways at LAX. They used to park all of us at the eastern end of the north runway where the planes would land right over the top of us. They moved us all out of there this past summer, which I thought was strange. What I saw was when I pulled in there, and I was followed twice by the cops when I pulled in and I took pictures. This thing it's a holding pen. It could hold thousands of people. It's right next to the tarmac. There's no buildings, no nothing. It's like a 10 or 12-foot fence with a permanent concrete base around the base of it. And there's 2 sets of barbed wire on top facing in and out. So, there's fences like that all over around the airport area.
They actually have one of those at Bergstrom and at the old airport. And I first reported it was a secret holding pen. But the news said I was a conspiracy theorist, but that it was to hold people during civil unrest. So I'm bad for being right and breaking the news. I don't get an award. I'm bad because I'm right, and it's kooky not to like it.
What's going on at the old airport?
This is where the party could end up, Walt, if A2K and Y2K partiers do get out of hand.
These turnstiles, let me describe them, because you could say, well, it's part of an airport. No. These are those big tubular steel turnstiles. They go in, they don't come back out. There's no way to get back out. There's 4 sets of them, so there's like 16 turnstiles that go into this thing, and it's like the size of 3 football fields. You could get thousands of people. The thing about it that proves what it is because there's on the fence that goes onto the tarmac. You go straight onto the airport tarmac, where what kind of security is that? They put a big black gate in that you can pull trucks, buses, whatever into this holding pen. So it's built to move lots of people quickly into this pen and then move them onto the tarmac. Now, what is that for? Except to move people and put them onto aircraft?
No, that's like the Oklahoma City Federal Processing Center. I mean, this is actually all in the Emergency Centers Establishment Act, and it's just these creepy crooks and all the stuff with our money they've built against us because they know they're a bunch of crooks. What you just saw is a tiny snapshot of the evidence. My film, Police State 4, The Rise of FEMA, is 16 years of condensed research on the blueprint for the globalist takeover. You notice we reverse engineered this years ago, and we've been unbelievably accurate now that they've publicly announced all this. We're now in post-denial phase. They know they've got a 9% approval rating. They know you're awake to them. Now they're just going with pure intimidation. They think you're fearful. I know you're like me. You're strong, you're deliberative, you're focused, you're committed. The facts are now out. You're going to stand against this. I get a lot of emails saying, why do you cover all this? It's scary. You're going to scare people. I don't think you're cowards. I think when you're faced with the truth, like Patrick Henry said, you'll want the truth and make preparation for it. Just denying the stuff doesn't make it go away. It's like folks I've known who smoke 3 packs of cigarettes. They go, oh, I know you can get cancer, but I never will, and they get cancer. I mean, wouldn't you rather me say, hey, quit smoking cigarettes? And you're like, well, I've been smoking them. I'm going to live in denial. No, quit now, and statistically you won't get lung cancer as quickly. Well, it's the same thing. We got a real case of sickening, disgusting, degenerate tyranny. And we need to be honest about it. I know there's a lot of mainstream dinosaur media watching. Look, stop acting stupid. You don't have to be spoon-fed everything. Look up congressional hearings. There's film of it. Rex 84. Look up Emergency Centers Establishment Act. Look up Civilian Inmate Labor Camp Program. Look up Continuity of Government Civil Unrest Program. Look up decommissioned bases used for civil emergencies. Stop living in la-la land.
This has been another edition of Carrie Geren Scoggins Political Newsletter, Bible Prophecy Times Edition, End Times Prophecy News Update.